This narrative touches on themes of physical violence, gore, and abuse. The tea is excessively sweet, odd since I don't remember adding any sugar. The morning sunlight streams through the kitchen window, with dust particles swirling in the golden rays like memories attempting to settle. I scoop out 2 portions of my favorite morning blend, the dark aromatic leaves contrasting against the light ceramic. "Elliot, you don't enjoy sugar, do you?" I inquire, casting a glance at my husband, who's seated in his usual spot. He shakes his head just as he has for the past 43 years. The kettle softly hisses steam into the tranquil home. I pour 2 cups, the amber liquid glistening in the light. My phone vibrates on the counter, Sarah's face illuminating the screen. My daughter, always checking in on me. "Hello?" I respond, my voice laced with motherly warmth. "Mom, have you taken your medication?" Concern weaves through her tone like a dark thread. "Yes, of course, sweetheart. I'm just enjoying tea with your father." The response flows easily, as natural as breathing. "Mom." Her voice falters, cracking like fragile ice. "Daddy isn't here. You're hallucinating again." "Nonsense, darling. Your father is right here. Say, 'Hello, Elliot.'" I place the phone on the chair opposite me, where Elliot sits in his brown cardigan with leather patches on the elbows. The call disconnects. "How rude, isn't it?" I scoff, making my way back to the kitchen island. Something tugs the corners of my mind, like a loose thread threatening to unravel everything. I take a deep breath, fill my glass under the tap, and swallow my medicine. The pills feel heavy like stones in my throat. When I turn around, the chair is vacant. The room suddenly feels expansive and empty. "Elliot?" My voice reverberates in the silence. "Where have you gone, you silly old man?" I wander through the house, each room growing darker than the last. "Elliot?" My voice escalates, bouncing off walls that seem to close in. "Stop hiding. Your tea is getting cold." Then I notice it. The reality I've been avoiding for days, weeks, months. Who can tell any more? Time has become fluid and unreliable. There in the study, where the afternoon light barely reaches, a dark stain long dried to black, and what remains of my Elliot. His skull crushed like a shattered teacup. I never moved the body. The recollection bursts through the carefully built barriers of my thoughts. The dispute over his medication, his obstinacy, my fury. The heavy brass candlestick remains on the mantel, despite having polished it countless times in my dreams. The walls start to throb with a nauseating beat, and I find myself kneeling next to what's left of my husband. The carpet has absorbed so much of him, now stiff and darkened by his essence. My fingers trace the patterns in the dried blood, recalling how it felt warm and sticky that first night, as I sat beside him until dawn, sipping cup after cup of tea, hoping he would stop being so theatrical and rise up. Sarah keeps calling, but I've chosen to ignore her. She wouldn't grasp the significance of our tea parties, or how Elliot still prefers his Earl Grey with just a dash of milk, no sugar. She wouldn't know about the forgiveness he offered me that third night when his spirit finally settled into the chair opposite mine, wearing that gentle smile that made me fall for him back in medical school. The police will eventually arrive. Sarah will ensure that happens. But for now, I pour another cup of tea, observing the steam rise like spirits. In the dimming light, Elliot sits across from me, ever patient, his skull reassembling itself in the shadows between moments. "Sugar?" I inquire, even though I already know his response. He shakes his head just as he has done every morning for 43 years, and I feign ignorance to the way that motion causes fragments of him to disintegrate, scattering like dead leaves, across the carpet where his blood has inscribed our story in dark, indelible ink. The tea is overly sweet, yet I sip it anyway. It carries the taste of copper and regret, of love turned cold and memories that refuse to fade. Outside, sirens begin to wail in the distance, their sound blending with the hushed conversations Elliot and I share in this twilight realm between reality and insanity. I should probably flee, but where can one escape from memories that bear your husband's likeness? Besides, Elliot would miss our morning tea, and I've already taken so much from him. I find myself sitting here, pouring a drink and hoping the world will eventually make sense again. The candlestick perched on the mantel captures the fading daylight, winking at me like a partner in crime. Elliot's blood has transformed the carpet into a map of our shattered dreams, and I run my trembling fingers along its edges, pondering, when love morphed into this dark, bittersweet essence that carries the taste of sugar I never added, and forgiveness I never truly earned. The sirens are drawing nearer now. Elliot grins at me from across a tea set prepared for two, his skull resembling a jigsaw puzzle that will never fit together again. "They're coming," he says, his voice reminiscent of leaves scraping against windows in autumn. "I know," I respond, reaching for the candlestick. "But first, how about one last cup of tea?" As evening descends, the room becomes increasingly dim, yet I hesitate to turn on the lights. Darkness has become my closest companion these past few weeks, concealing the worst of my actions and softening reality's harsh edges until everything merges into a gentle nightmare. The candlestick feels heavier now than it did that fateful night, its brass surface reflecting the dwindling light and taking on a sickly yellow hue. Memory can be quite peculiar. At times I recall every single detail of that night, the way Elliot's reading glasses slipped from his face when the candlestick struck, how his teacup shattered upon impact, spilling its contents across the carpet like a constellation of porcelain stars. Other moments, however, are shrouded in fog and shadow, akin to trying to remember a dream through the morning haze. Sarah reached out to the hospital yesterday, or perhaps it was last week. Time behaves oddly when you're sharing tea with ghosts. She informed them about my episodes and how I stopped taking my medication after Elliot's heart attack 3 months ago. But she's mistaken. Elliot didn't pass away from a heart attack. He's right here, enjoying tea with me, even if fragments of him keep drifting away like autumn leaves caught in a storm. The candlestick catches the light once more, and I recall how it felt in my hands that night. Elliot had been urging me to increase my dosage, insisting that my episodes were worsening. "It's for your own good," he had said, his tone both gentle and firm, reminiscent of how he used to address challenging patients. "You're not well, Margaret." The OA. Irony isn't lost on me as I sit in our study, the carpet stained with his blood beneath my feet, while my teacup overflows with memories that have a metallic taste of copper and regret. I wasn't in good shape back then, and I'm certainly not any better now, but at least I cherish these quiet moments with Elliot, these treasured tea times where we can act as if love never spiraled into violence, concern never morphed into resentment, and a lifetime of caring for others didn't culminate in a single moment of unthinkable rage. The sirens are now echoing down our street. Elliot's silhouette flickers in the encroaching darkness, resembling a candle flame flickering in a breeze. "It's time," he says, his voice sounding distant like an echo in an empty space. I nod, raising my teacup for one last toast. "I did love you, you know, even until the very end." "I know," he responds, and for a fleeting moment I see him as he was on that first day of medical school. Young, brilliant, and brimming with potential, before time, illness, and my own fractured mind reshaped our narrative into one filled with blood and regret. Now blue and red lights illuminate the walls, and heavy footsteps draw near to the front door. I place my teacup down, noticing how the remnants form a shape resembling a shattered skull at the bottom. Elliot has vacated his chair, yet I can still savor the sweetness he leaves behind. Sugar I never added to a life I couldn't save. The door swings open with force. I don't turn around. "Would anyone care for tea?" I ask the shadows, waiting for hands that aren't my husband's. I often find myself reflecting on that night. Though it feels like ages ago, the details are still vivid in my mind. The fear I felt then is still very much alive. Occasionally, when I drift off to sleep instead of the usual dreams, I'm transported back to that fateful evening. I wish it had never occurred. I wish I could erase it from my memory. I long to forget it entirely, but that's simply not possible. And it never will be, It's nighttime in the forest, somewhere on this planet. It's peaceful here. The creatures that roam during the day have retreated to their homes and nests. Most of them are fast asleep after busy days preparing for the upcoming hibernation season. Meanwhile, the nocturnal animals lie in wait, hoping for prey to pass by. Everything seems normal, until a sound breaks the silence, a soft thudding that grows increasingly loud. An owl, with brown feathers and wide eyes, sits high on a branch. She turns her head almost completely backward to investigate the source of the noise. There she spots a boy who is running. This boy races through the woods, moving quickly and gracefully, vaulting over fallen trees, thorny bushes, and slippery patches of moss with ease. The dead leaves crunch beneath his feet as he navigates the deer trails, where the underbrush is thinner, their tracks barely visible in the dirt. He ventures deeper into the forest, further away from any trace of human life. His expression reveals sheer terror and panic. His eyes are wide and frantic. He is fleeing from something, and judging by his demeanor, it's something truly frightening. His hands are scraped and bleeding, tiny drops of blood trickling down. As he runs, he wipes his hands on his clothes, trying to avoid leaving any lasting evidence of his presence in this place. The air is frigid. Winter is just around the corner. Thin layers of ice cover parts of the ground, and he carefully avoids stepping on them. He can't afford to slip and fall. The boy is lost, unfamiliar with this part of the forest. He has never explored this area before. The trees seem to close in around him, their branches mostly hiding him from view. The moon is nowhere to be seen behind the thick canopy. If it weren't for the few beams of moonlight filtering through the leaves, he would be enveloped in total darkness. Where is the boy sprinting off to? He has no idea. Just away from everything. Somewhere he can't be discovered. Somewhere he'll find safety. Suddenly the forest transforms into a swampy landscape. He first notices it by the mud shifting beneath him, seeping into his shoes, followed by the sounds around him. Frogs croaking and fireflies buzzing, a stark contrast to the near silence he had experienced moments before. The bushes quickly give way to tall cattails, and the ferns are replaced by wild vines. Although he's read about swamps in books and magazines, he's never actually set foot in one. Is he safe now? How far has he traveled? He longs to stop running. He yearns for a place to rest. His legs feel heavy, especially as he navigates the soft ground. With each step, his feet sink halfway into the mud. The boy feels lost and uncertain. He can't keep fleeing indefinitely. If he doesn't find a hiding spot soon, he will eventually be caught. He isn't quick enough to escape whatever is pursuing him. In front of him, he notices a cluster of mangroves. Their roots twist out of the mud like twisted skeletal fingers, as if a giant had perished in the swamp long ago, its outstretched hands morphing into tree roots. There. Look at the spark of excitement on his face, the glimmer of hope in his eyes. An idea strikes him. For the first time, he feels a sense of real hope. Once he reaches the mangroves, the boy plunges into the muck. He grips the roots and pulls himself forward. Covered in mud, it seeps into his ears, nose, and mouth. He crawls between the roots, exhaling to squeeze through. He spits out a mouthful of mud. Salt water drips onto his head as he hides among the roots. Everything is dark. He fumbles around until he can sit up, unable to retreat any further. From this position, he wipes some of the silt from his face, giving him a limited view of the roots surrounding him and the swamp beyond. His breathing is uneven, and he covers his mouth to stay quiet. The air he exhales escapes between his fingers, pale and wispy. He should be safe here. No one will find him in this spot. All he can do now is wait. He trembles intensely. Now that, he's paused, his mind no longer preoccupied with running. The boy truly feels the biting cold. Soaked from head to toe, the chill seeps into him. The mud beneath him is hardening and icy against his skin. It's becoming increasingly difficult to keep his eyes open and maintain clear thoughts. He longs to drift off to sleep, but understands that doing so could mean he never wakes up again. He could freeze to death. He can't remain in this spot indefinitely. But where else can he go? What other options does he have? Lost in a whirlwind of thoughts and fears, he suddenly hears a distant boom. Whether it's 10 feet or 10 miles away from his hiding place, the ground shakes slightly, the wildlife falls silent, and the sound echoes through the mangrove roots. In that moment, as the swamp becomes utterly still, as the water lapping at his legs creates gentle ripples, and as his heart races faster within his chest, the boy starts to weep. Perhaps I never really escaped those roots. Perhaps I'm still being pursued. Maybe I've already died and found myself in purgatory. I can't say for sure. I might never find out. All I wish for is the chance to move past this one day. Maybe it will come true. Maybe it won't. Regardless, I'm still just as frightened as I was when I was huddled among the mangroves. Brina's teacup rattles against its saucer, splashing minty liquid onto the aged wooden table. The sound reverberates through her cottage, creating a rhythmic echo that resonates deep within her. With shaky hands, she places her cup down and stands up, her feet seemingly moving towards the door on their own. As she opens the latch, it creaks, unveiling an unexpected sight at her doorstep. Princess Ilara appears before her, radiant despite her evident distress, her silk gown shimmering in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. The princess's eyes are filled with sorrow and urgency. "Mistress Elmswood," Ilara breathes out, her voice cracking. "I bring dreadful news. My mother, the queen, she has passed away." The weight of her words hangs heavily in the air, surreal and chilling. Brina feels a shiver run down her spine, a sensation unrelated to the coolness of the morning forest. She invites the princess inside, her mind racing as she attempts to grasp the gravity of this revelation. As Ilara enters the cottage, the aroma of herbs and simmering potions wraps around her, a stark contrast to the lavish palace she has escaped from. Brina leads her to a chair, observing how the princess's usual elegance is now overshadowed by barely concealed trembling. Brina grips the teacup tightly, her heart pounding. The familiar porcelain suddenly feels foreign in her hands, as if reality has shifted. She gazes at Ilara, her thoughts swirling with fragmented memories and incomplete ideas. Ilara? The name escapes her lips involuntarily, carrying a taste of sweetness and bitterness. The princess's eyes widen, a flicker of recognition breaking through her sorrowful expression. "You know me?" Brina instinctively opens her mouth to refute it, to claim that she only knows the princess by her reputation. Yet the words get stuck in her throat, entwined with the fog clouding her thoughts. She glances down at her cup, still brimming with mint tea, its surface perfectly calm, untouched by time or her trembling hands. She can't recall drinking from it. She doesn't remember making it. The realization sends a tremor through her, radiating like ripples from a stone dropped into calm water. Suddenly, the cottage feels both hauntingly familiar and unsettlingly strange. The shelves lined with jars of herbs, the frayed rug beneath her feet, and the air thick with the fragrance of sage and rosemary. All of it vibrates with a disquieting sense of wrongness. Ilara leans in closer, her silk gown rustling softly like murmured secrets. "Mistress Elmswood, are you all right? You look as if you've encountered a ghost." Brina wants to chuckle at the irony, but the laughter gets stuck in her throat. Instead, she places the cup down with deliberate care, observing how the liquid inside remains unnervingly still. I'm not certain," she replies, her voice sounding distant even to herself. "Princess, how did you locate me here?" The question seems to catch Ilara off guard, a frown forming on her forehead. I've always known where to find you, haven't I?" The last part emerges as a tentative inquiry, uncertainty creeping into her tone. The atmosphere in the cottage thickens, charged with an energy that raises the hairs on Brina's arms. Outside, the forest appears to close in, the dappled sunlight taking on an unsettling green hue. Time stretches out like taffy, elongating into what feels like eternity. Brina's attention is drawn to a small mirror hanging on the wall. Her reflection gazes back at her, but for a fleeting moment something seems off, perhaps older or younger, a face she knows well yet cannot quite place. She turns back to Ilara, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me about the Queen. Share what happened. Tell me everything," Brina urges gently, her tone steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. She reaches for a vial of calming draught, uncorking it with practiced skill. Ilara's words spill out. A hurried rush, her carefully maintained composure crumbling like sandcastles. It happened during the night. No warning, no illness, she simply didn't wake up. The princess's hands tense and relax in her lap. "But there's more, Mistress Elmswood. Something unnatural about her death." The court physician whispered of strange markings, of an aura that lingered. Brina listens closely, her thoughts racing. The Queen, apparently in good health, suddenly incapacitated? And these murmurs of something unnatural. A chill runs through her, making her hyper-aware of the shadows lurking in her cottage corners, and how the air seems to grow heavier with each word Ilara utters. As she hands the soothing potion to the princess, Brina's fingers lightly touch Ilara's, and for a fleeting moment, an electric connection, recognition, a premonition, sparks between them. Their eyes meet, and Brina perceives a desperate longing. In Ilara's gaze, a silent hope that this simple potion maker might possess answers to unvoiced questions. Outside, the forest appears to hold its breath. The usual sounds of wildlife have vanished into silence. Brina's hands freeze above her mortar as a sudden rattle shakes her cottage window, dry leaves scraping against the warped glass. The rosemary sprig slips from her quivering fingers onto the stained wood of her work table, which seems to twitch faintly like beetle legs beneath parchment skin. "Third time this week," she mutters to no one but the bitter air thick with the scent of mandrake tincture. The braided protective charms hanging above her door swing counterclockwise, even though there's no breeze. Beyond her crooked herb garden, black pines stretch out, their branches clawing at the moonlit mist, tearing it into frayed ribbons of glowing light. Wait, those aren't fireflies flickering between the trunks. Their eyes, glimmering chartreuse needles shifting beneath bark that oozes sap like honeyed mercury. Don't look directly at them. She knows better than that. 9 years of solitude should count for something. Fresh yarrow is needed. Come on, dawn, if dawn still graces this particular valley, when her bone charm necklace suddenly radiates heat against her sternum. As the kitchen shadows peel away from the walls and dart across, the ceiling beams in fluid streaks, forming glyph-like shapes she almost comprehends. They shatter like ice under the weight of painful memories behind her left eye, where Mother used to press cold coins during spring fevers. Brina forcefully pounds the mortar against the pestle, enough to fracture the limestone. She dismisses the trembling wall plaster, which weeps rusty tears down its milky surface. "You'll receive your offering when the wind calms," she asserts. The entire forest seems to take a collective breath, roots creaking deep beneath the frost. Something immense stirs just below the thin layer of soil. Brina quickly tucks a handful of dried nettles into her apron pocket before her fingers can lose focus again. She picks up her knife and starts slicing monkshood root with precision. Each crescent-shaped piece wriggles slightly before settling down like spiders curling their legs as they count the moments until darkness glows green. Despite it being well past sundown, she remains focused at the window, not turning or blinking as she continues chopping. The ironwood handle begins to sweat sticky resin under her palm, while the floorboards arch upward, twisting beneath her boots. The cupboard door stands wide open, releasing the scent of singed hair and drowned orchids. Brina hums a childhood lullaby off-key through clenched teeth, tossing salt over her shoulder, and hearing it sizzle against the stone walls, which exhale a damp mineral breath that trickles down her spine, vertebrae locked in place like animals trapped within bone. Suddenly, something heavy thuds against the doorframe, causing the wood to groan at impossible angles. An owl hoots 3 times from the chimney, then lets out a laugh that sounds almost human through the soot-streaked bricks. Brina slaps her bleeding palm against the oak table, which is etched with 9 protective sigils crafted by hands not entirely her own during the last winter solstice. Enough. The silence resonates like crystal struck, gradually filling with the familiar song of crickets as the worn floorboards settle back into alignment, the night air still yet cold burning, normal through the drafty windows. Brina exhales a 7-count breath, gazing at her wrinkled hands marked by years of both ordinary and extraordinary work. She notices a new scar on her left thumb knuckle, already healing into silver tissue. It's happening too quickly. They're waking earlier every time, she confides to the 3 dried crows hanging upside down from the rafters, their plumage shimmering with oil-slick purples that remain elusive in candlelight. I should prepare more bone meal. But as she reaches for her grimoire, a leather-bound book chained to an iron pedestal, the pages flutter open on their own, revealing fresh writing that bleeds across the vellum in ash-gray letters. Not your concern, little warden. Keep stirring your saba siwaiju. Poisoned broths. Brina runs her trembling finger along the sentence, which morphs into illustrations depicting thorny towers piercing the belly of clouds, black spires jutting violently through star maps rearranged across ink-blotted calembours. Recognition strikes, her like an icicle between her ribs, a wave of blood-hot dread flooding her throat, because those jagged silhouettes match the exact lines she has painstakingly avoided in every tapestry woven for the Heartwood Royals. Oh no, not again, not when… She forcefully closes the grimoire, the chain links hissing like angry beetles retreating into darkness. A distant scream pierces the night, reminiscent of an owl or perhaps an elm, certainly carrying a regal pitch, that echoes toward the castle. After all these years spent listening from the edges of the forest, she recognizes that unmistakable tone. The princess's lungs still resonate with the same note of panic she felt at age 7 when hunting hounds cornered her outside the kennels. Brina presses her palms against her eyes until colors explode in her vision. Don't, she admonishes herself aloud. Her healer's oath forbids interference. For 9 winters, the poison pact has held firm, unless the rest is unreadable. The floor undulates like liquid beneath her feet as a mortar bowl shatters, releasing pungent herbs that scatter in fractal patterns across the swaying boards and pages of the grimoire. A desperate rattle fills the air, akin to a caged bird's cries, until brass chains snap with sudden cracks, embedding themselves in the ceiling beams. The tome flings open, shrieking as paper cuts slice through the air, releasing a scarlet scent of ozone and desperation. An illustration now glows with a sickly yellow-green hue, the heartwood crest inverted and overlapped by sigils older than the first kings, the first forests, and the first breaths. Mortal words bubble up unbidden from the depths of her memory, carved below the threshold of sanity. Brina reaches for the obsidian dagger, wrapped in velvet and hidden under a loose floor stone. Since the last equinox, the sting of betrayal bites into her left palm, familiar and painful. Vital droplets stain the grimoire's pages, smoke rising to spell out a verdict in cuneiform ash. The 3 queens begin to stir. Roots drink deeply from the corruption. A key bears sapphire tears. With a fierce curse, she kicks the table leg hard, enough to crack a toe bone. Ignoring the pain already knitting together, she watches as the illustrations rearrange into blueprints of a prison. She recognizes the tattooed collars of scullery maids, blacksmith daughters sleepwalking toward midden, pits and garrison soldiers melting like wax dolls near the armory shadows. All signs pointing toward the castle, where reality's fabric is fraying rapidly. The princess screams again, closer now, vibrating through Brina's wolfish molars and stirring memories of teaching the royal child not to crush forest mushrooms under her slippers. It feels like ghostly, fingers clutching at her heart in the present moment. Damn nobility, Brina snarls as she tosses ingredients into her travel satchel. Damn prophecies, damn sentient architecture. Glass jars shatter protective wards as she stomps toward the door, grabbing her gnarled staff made from lightning-struck oak. If the Heartwood bloodline is consumed, I want full rights to damnation. The forest parts before her staff's glow, trees, bowing with thorny branches while moonlight turns viscous, dripping like thick sap between leaves that whisper warnings in fungal spore languages. Brina strides uphill, her boots sinking into the rich rot that wasn't there yesterday. The ground remembers old bones and sings up through her soles in a funeral dirge rhythm. Stag skulls tumble from the thicket shadows, their antlers weaving thorn cages around the path behind her. Brina doesn't look back. She knows better than to acknowledge invitations written in marrow. The princess's scream fractures into 3 distinct tones: child, woman, crone, each sound resonating with a different set of teeth. Brina ejects a molar. It smolders faintly amethyst against the leaf litter. You should have let the wolves take you that winter. She deceives the ghostly memory of Alara, who clutched a doll drenched in hound saliva. The forest sheds its skin halfway up the slope, familiar. Oaks now weeping amber resin, their eyes forming between the birch trees. Paper scrolls peel back from the trunks, unveiling obsidian mirrors that reflect Brina's visage as she could have been. A crown weighing heavily on her sharp-chinned face, lips stained wine-black from indulging in courtly schemes. She kicks the nearest mirror with enough force to shatter the reflections. Flattery won't work, hag spawn. The path ahead tightens like a constricted rib cage, saplings bending close like drunken revelers. Their leaves hum with wasp wing warnings inscribed in bursts of pollen. Stay healer, stay safe, keep stirring, keep sleeping. Dust on tongue, inaudible. Brina thrusts her hands into her travel satchel and tosses powdered ravenclaw and dried comet tail lichen into the air. The ingredients ignite mid-flight, transforming into cobalt butterflies that tear through the verdant prison bars. Their proboscis needles bore sizzling holes into the fabric of reality. She steps through the burning wings which cling to her hair like cursed hairpins. The castle looms across the newly formed chasm where a moat should be, its stones heavy with a slow-breathing malice. Arrow slits dilating rapidly as Brina draws. Near. The drawbridge rises, its jagged teeth blocking her path. Still using Mother's face, I see. She snaps at the mortar gap that oozes with queenly perfume. A cheap trick for a cheaper ambition. The staff globe dims as the bridge consumes itself, but Brina is already in motion. With her left palm pressed against the damp wall, she feels the keystone whispering a half-remembered lullaby through the limestone pores. Muscle memory guides her fingers into cracks that shouldn't exist here. She quickly carves a sigil using her thumbnail and blood that has clotted under her hastily healing flesh. The keystone screams awake, giving birth to a new staircase spiraling downward through impossible terrain. Brina counts the ache of each step. 17. She turns just in time to notice the walls growing warm and breathing hot against her neck. While her pocket watch ticks backward, yet her pulse races forward down until unreadable. The princess stands shackled to a clockwork heart larger than a banquet hall, its piston valves pumping black syrup from ruptured aquifers. A crown of starlight nails pierces deep into her braided hair. Her eyes filled with moth-wing confessions, her mouth moving in silent pleas, wrists raw from tugging at vines entwined around ancestral portraits. Brina halts mid-reach as the grimoire's warning sears fresh behind her eyelids. Not your concern, little warden, but the voice of child Alara overlays the current screams. You, promised. The floor yawns between them, teeth emerging from the flagstones. The pendulum of the grandmother clock swings scythe-sharp, missing Brina's throat by a breath's width. Lie's sake, she utters forbidden phrases, savoring the way the air thickens around them. Blood ties run deeper. Then promises, broken girl. The staff collides with the engine core, erupting in a shower of cursed sparks that explode like festive fireworks. Brina savors the electric reality. The princess, or princessa, isn't merely a victim. She's an anchor, chain, pulling the realm into the abyss below. Oh, those clever queens, always embedding keys within the throbbing flesh of mortals. 3 crows burst forth from the satchel, Deathclaw revived, circling and screeching as they pluck starlight nails one by one with beaks forged from forgotten apologies. The castle trembles, disintegrating into a mosaic of deceit, brick by bloody brick. Brina seizes Ilara's forearm, feeling both warmth and something wriggling beneath the skin. "This will hurt," she cautions before forcefully pressing her royal palm against the exposed heart gears. A sapphire tear carves a path down the princess's cheekbone, igniting as it plunges through the machinery. The entire world halts mid-scream, then silence. Then, new melody emerges. Brina's stomach churns as she trails Ilara through the castle's twisting corridors. The walls throb with a sickly, otherworldly glow, casting grotesque shadows that writhe and twist with each step. Tapestries depicting ancient battles ripple as if caught in an unseen breeze, their figures shifting and contorting into strange forms. "It's changed," Ilara murmurs, her voice quivering. "The castle, it feels different." Brina grimly nods, her gaze flitting from one distorted corner to another. The air thickens with the stench of decay and something else, something primal and wrong. She grips her staff tighter, sensing the wood, pulsing with barely restrained energy. As they turn a corner, they encounter a group of servants. Their eyes are vacant, unseeing, and their smiles stretch unnaturally wide across their faces. One maid, with straw-colored hair, drops her tray, the clatter echoing unnaturally through the halls. "De nuevo tu," she whispers, her voice a rasp that seems to resonate from the very stones beneath them. Brina experiences a jolt of recognition, a memory struggling to break free from the haze in her mind. She opens her mouth to speak, but the words falter as the maid's face begins to melt, dripping like wax from a candle. Ilara screams, the sound slicing through the heavy silence. The other servants turn in unison, their grins expanding impossibly wider, teeth elongating into razor-sharp points. "Run!" Brina yells, yanking Ilara's arm and dragging her down a side passage. The princess stumbles, her silk slippers slipping on floors slicked with a viscous black substance. Behind them, the servants pursue relentlessly, their footsteps creating a chaotic symphony of squelching and scraping sounds. Brina's staff ignites, enveloping them in a protective blue light as they race further into the castle's labyrinthine depths. They crash through a pair of elaborate doors into what used to be the grand ballroom. Now it resembles a horrifying mockery of its former glory. The ceiling stretches endlessly upward, with chandeliers swinging like grotesque pendulums. The floor beneath them undulates like a disturbed pond, with faces rising from below, mouths, agape and silent screams. In the middle of the room stands a figure that sends chills down Brina's spine. It's the queen, or what's left of her. Her body is a jumbled assembly of mismatched parts sewn together with threads of starlight. Her crown tilts awkwardly on a head that's too large for her frame, her eyes bulging and rolling wildly. "Mother?" Ilara whispers, her voice trembling. The queen thing moves in a jerky manner. The queen thing grins. Brina's staff slips from her unsteady hands as memories flood her mind like a dam bursting. 13 summers ago, mornings yet to come, endless moments, converging into perfect harmony. Trembling hands recall holding terracotta cups in a thatched hut, filled with the scents of rosemary and decay. Ilara but not Ilara, placing a steaming drink between her palms. Brina but stranger, smiling over a chipped porcelain rim. 100,000 tea times merging into one. The vision sharpens. That last morning before everything fell apart. A young princess with eyes too wise for her age pushes ink-black tea across a scarred pine table. The liquid surface ripples against the edges, forming a single, unblinking eye that isn't hers, isn't human, isn't inaudible. "You always choose this part," memory Ilara whispers as frost flowers bloom on Brina's knuckles. The running, the noble, sacrifice. Her smile fractures into intricate patterns. "Let me show you how crowns are dismantled." Present and past collide in a cacophony when Brina takes a drink.